What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2021 Chevy Trailblazer Activ. Huge thanks to Chevy for providing me here with the Activ version of the Trailblazer to review for you guys today. So about the all-new Trailblazer here. So this is a new addition here for 2021. And yes, they've used the Trailblazer name on a vehicle that used to be this big SUV that even had an SS trim, and now it's on a subcompact crossover. Getting beyond that, I think it's a really cool looking subcompact crossover. One of the coolest, I think, in this segment. And, you know, it does have some familiar looks to the Kona up front here. You know, it's a very similar setup that the Blazer also uses with these very slim accent lights and then your actual headlights there lower in the front bumper. But I think it actually looks very good. And especially in this Zeus bronze color, it really just, I think it looks really cool with the white roof and the sportier wheels and tires you have on this Activ trim. Now the Activ trim is supposed to be the one that's more off-road ready, but it's pretty mild in its setup. So it gives you a skid plate. You do actually have a real skid plate under there. And then in addition to that, you also have off-road suspension tuning, they say, as well as some tires that are a little bit more off-road oriented on these smaller 17-inch wheels. And then you also get LED taillights there as a nice little bonus for this Activ trim. And so now if you don't want the off-road package, there are several other trims of the Trailblazer here, including an RS trim, which actually gives you 18-inch wheels, so a little bit bigger on normal street, you know, focused tires. And so that might be the sportier choice, but you know, this one should be a little bit better off-road, I suppose, with that. But otherwise, you know, like I said, that white roof really stands out. You don't have to have a two-tone roof on these, but I think it's a really cool option. I'm glad they're offering that. And then going out to the back, I personally love the C-pillar and how you have not only the contrasting color, but you also have a little black piece in between to connect the two. And those taillights look very good, again, very Blazer inspired. And the back end also looks pretty cool with the hatch area and how it kind of comes to a point by the Chevy badge there. It's just very interesting, you know, especially considering that the other vehicle that Chevy offers in this segment, the Trax, is pretty bland with its styling. This is a lot more exciting, and I commend them for being bold with the styling choices on this. You even have real exhaust tips in the lower part of the rear bumper there, which is rare on any vehicles these days, and so that's kind of cool that those tips actually do function as exhaust tips. And but yeah, overall, I think this is a really attractive little subcompact crossover. All right, so start up and go for a drive. So the Trailblazer has the same Chevy key as other models, which is a really nice key. It just has a few buttons there in the back of it. It's a really nice weight though, and it's not too big. I really like this key, especially other companies have cheaper keys in this segment, and this one's pretty nice. But of course, it's keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start here in the higher trims of the Trailblazer. So you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. Also, if you're curious to hear about the interior in the Trailblazer, my wife and I actually just did a full in-depth interior review on the Trailblazer here, so I will link that above. You can go watch that if you want to hear all the details on this interior. Overall, it's a pretty nice place to be. They did dress it up a little bit here for this one's higher as-tested price of about $32,000. But there are still some parts of this interior that feel cheap and remind you that you're starting off with a car that originally is about $20,000 for its base model. But like I said, go watch that interior review if you want to hear all the details on this interior. Alright, so setting off here in the 2021 Chevy Trailblazer. So, first thing you notice about the Trailblazer, we're sitting up nice and high, and that's not always a given with subcompact crossovers. And so the fact that this one does give you that real SUV type seating position is really nice. And so it gives it a really good driving feel here. You know, behind the wheel, you have a commanding view of the road. You know, I do wish that the side mirror here wasn't mounted to the A-pillar the way that it is, because that A-pillar is a little bit chunky, but it's not too bad. I mean, just great view out of the sides, good view out of the back, and so it's going to be a very easy car to drive in that regard. You have a backup camera, lots of safety tech. This one has the optional blind spot monitoring and the adaptive cruise, all that kind of stuff, which I'll talk about more in a little bit. But so it makes it very easy to drive. Also, the ride is pretty good here in the Trailblazer. So even though this has this off-road suspension tuning, they say, and these all-terrain tires, you know, it still isn't too off-roady. They didn't go too extreme. This is still just a subcompact crossover. If you do want a subcompact crossover that can do a little bit more off-roading, the Jeep Renegade's still basically the only game in town with its locking differential and its four-wheel drive low mode, all that kind of stuff. This just has a normal all-wheel drive system. But anyway, so I mean, that's good because the ride is very uncompromised. It's still very smooth, even with these tires. They don't make a lot of noise like you get on actual off-road tires and stuff. And so I think it's a nice balance of you know what, if you're being honest with yourselves, most subcompact crossover buyers don't need any kind of off-road stuff. So this gives you the cool look and slightly more capability, but you know, still doesn't compromise that ride, which I like. Also, a couple things to note. So throttle response is very good, but the brake response is really good and immediate, but every time that I touch the brake pedal, there's this little clicking sound that it makes, and I don't know why. I think this is the first vehicle where it makes a noise every time you touch the brake pedal like that. It's kind of strange and a little unrefined, but otherwise they all, you know, the brakes and the gas all work very good, so no complaints as far as that goes. Steering's also nice and light, but pretty direct, and actually feels pretty good. For a little vehicle like this, you don't need any kind of heavy sporty steering or anything like that, and so I think that again is really nicely set up, especially for city driving. But I'm going to head and put it into the all-wheel drive mode and the sport mode here, and let's turn down onto this back road and see how it does. Here we go. Okay. So it's leisurely, but it's not too bad. I was seeing other reviews on the Trailblazer, and people were really giving this thing a hard time for not having a lot of power. And yes, it does have a small engine. It's a 1.3 liter turbocharged 3-cylinder engine. It's not even a 4-cylinder, it's a 3. It does 155 horsepower though, and 174 pound-feet of torque. And this is an upgraded motor you get here in the higher trims of the Trailblazer here. If you go for the lower trims, you get a little 1.2 liter 3-cylinder. So it's a little bit smaller, has 137 horsepower. And that one is paired up with a CVT transmission, as are all front-wheel drive versions of the Trailblazer. Now this one has the all-wheel drive option, which is a couple thousand extra, and then with that you get a 9-speed real automatic transmission, which I think feels a little bit better than the CVT probably will, although I have not driven the CVT, so I can't say definitively. But you know, this 9-speed auto though has been really well behaved in my time. I've already been driving this vehicle for about a week now. I haven't driven it a ton. I've put about 65 miles on it so far, but you know, just all the around town, going, getting groceries, going to Target, you know, all those types of little errand running type things, it has been a really nice little companion, very easy to park, and you know, I've really enjoyed just cruising around in it here. But now we're on a little bit of a rougher road here, and you can hear there's some road noise, but honestly it's not much worse than any other vehicle in this segment. I think the only one that gives you more refinement in this segment is going to be the Mazda CX-30, and I'm going to be referencing the CX-30 several times in this review because it's almost identical in its pricing to this, and it's a lot nicer in a lot of ways, but we'll get to the comparison in a little bit. But you know, so I mean, I guess this is par for the course, but like I said, there are options out there that are a little bit quieter and more refined. But anyway, we're coming up some corners here, and let's see how the Trailblazer handles them. So, again, we have the Activ trim, so you have the, you know, slightly more off-roady suspension tuning. I'm not sure how far they went with that, but that plus the tires, you know, means that you have limits that feel a little bit lower. Now, I'd say this still handles better than like a Jeep Renegade or something like that. But as my camera gear goes flying, it does a pretty good job. I'm been pleasantly surprised with the handling. I thought it would actually be handling a little bit worse than it does. It is fairly light, so that helps as well. These, even with the all-wheel drive and stuff, it's around 3,323 pounds. So, you know, fairly lightweight for, again, all-wheel drive. I think the smaller engine really helps, and the small dimensions, of course, too. But I am impressed, though. I mean, I don't know if it's just because it's in sport mode or what, but whenever you do get to a point where you're expecting understeer, you get some understeer, but it kind of gets a little more neutral. It's not bad with its handling, and with a lot of other vehicles in this segment, they just like to push, and you know, they're a little bit more sedate with their handling. This is pretty good. Now, I still don't think it's best in class. I think the Mazda CX-30, even though that's a little more relaxed in its suspension tuning, it's not as quick with its turning because the steering's heavier in that and stuff, so that makes it feel a little lazier, but it actually, you know, does have higher limits than this does, and I can feel that these limits are a little bit lower here with these tires, which by the way are 225 wide tires, but they're these hand-cooked all-terrain type tires, but they're not too aggressive or anything. And maybe the handling would be a little bit better if you had the RS package, which is the way I would spec one of these, which has 18-inch wheels, a little bit bigger, less off-road type tire. You know, the suspension tuning will be more normal and not off-road ready. So that might have a little bit of handling, and if you're looking for a Trailblazer that handles a little bit better, that might be the way to go. But I think this is still going to be totally fine for everyone's average commutes and stuff. Unless you are an enthusiast that loves flying around corners, I don't think you're going to be let down by the handling of the Trailblazer. Yeah, let's try another acceleration with the wheel turned here. Okay, so I maybe got a tiny bit of wheel spin before it helped me out, but it really does do a good job with this all-wheel drive system. Unfortunately, it's been pretty dry and it's the middle of summer here, so I can't really try out the all-wheel drive system a whole lot. But I will say that there's a couple of times where I would step on it. I wouldn't even go full throttle, but this engine just is fairly torquey, and so if I wasn't in all-wheel drive mode, it would want to spin those front tires pretty easily. And so, you know, just one thing to note, that it does seem like it does work pretty quickly here because I don't have any wheel spin whenever you're in the all-wheel drive mode, so that's nice. Getting back to this engine though, so like I said, some others are complaining that it doesn't have enough power and stuff, but if you look at the competition, now there's really like two segments of subcompact crossovers these days. There's some of the cheaper stuff that's front wheel drive only, and so obviously this having the all-wheel drive has a leg up on all of those, and so some of those, you know, have less power. I think the thing that's a little bit disappointing about the Trailblazer is it's 9.4 seconds 0 to 60 time, which is what Car and Driver got in their testing, and that's kind of surprising because even the Hyundai Venue, which has a non-turbo 1.6 liter 4-cylinder engine, and that only has like 119 horsepower or something, that still is like a full second quicker 0 to 60 than this. And even, you know, some of the competitors to the Trailblazer here, for example, there's like the Hyundai Kona, and that again for basically the same money, it gives you a bigger 1.6 liter 4-cylinder turbo engine, and that gives you about 20 more horsepower and 20 more pound-feet of torque. And I don't know why 20 extra horsepower makes such a huge difference, but that is like, I think almost 3 seconds quicker 0 to 60 than this, and feels so much quicker. I mean, I've reviewed a Kona already in the past, and I mean, those feel really quick and sporty. The Kia Seltos is another one that uses that same engine and transmission combo as the Kona. That also feels very punchy with its turbo setup. And this just, you know, yeah, you're down on power a little bit, but it just feels so much slower than those for some reason. I mean, but it's not terrible, like I said, compared to all that other stuff. You know, the Nissan Juke is really pretty slow feeling, although the Juke does handle a little bit in a more fun and playful manner than this does. But again, that's front wheel drive. I'm assuming if you're interested in the Trailblazer, especially the Activ trim, you want all wheel drive. So I'm not going to really dwell on the front wheel drive competition because they are also much cheaper. You can get a fully loaded Hyundai Venue or a Nissan Kicks or something for like 24 grand with every option and everything else. So, I mean, way cheaper than this one, being as tested $32,000. And I'll get to the pricing in a minute. But so, you know, I think that's where the Trailblazer's let down a little bit, because by the numbers you might think, okay, well, the power's pretty close, it shouldn't be that big of a difference, but it is a pretty big difference. But again, I don't think it's too bad. You know, I've merged onto the highway in this thing already. I've, you know, passed on the highway, done accelerations and stuff, and yeah, it's not going to be impressive, but to me it doesn't feel really slow like the Kicks can feel at times, and even the Venue can feel a little bit pokey at times, even with its faster 0 to 60. And so, you know, I think the turbo really does give you a little bit of extra grunt in this, especially in the lower RPMs. And you might think having a little bit less power, maybe you'll get a little bit better fuel economy, and obviously your experience will vary, but you know, as far as the numbers go, the fuel economy isn't really any higher than any of the competition, and in some cases some of the competitors actually have better fuel economy even with more powerful engines, or larger engines at least. This is one of the smallest in its segment. So these are rated at 26 in the city, 30 on the highway, and 28 combined. And so in my time of driving now, 70 miles, now I did do a decent amount of idling and stuff like that, but I got 23.5 mpg. I think it's fair to at least round it up to 24 if you exclude the idling and stuff, maybe even mid 24s, but that still is, you know, a decent bit under the 26, which I should be getting in the city. And I didn't do exclusively city driving. I drove on the highway a little bit, but that didn't seem to help the average much. And even whenever I look back at the trip computer that I didn't reset on this vehicle, it was delivered from about 250 miles away from where I live here. So a lot of highway cruising, and even still the average over 653 miles is 24.3 mpg. So, I mean, it's, you know, like 1 mpg better, not even. So I think this is one of those cases where the engine has to work really hard because it's so small, and you have the larger engines in all the competitors, which are less stressed, which can still get just as good a fuel economy because they're coasting at 2,000 RPMs, while this thing's revving to 4,000 RPMs, desperately trying to give you that same power. And so, it's just kind of interesting that they chose an engine as small as this. But I guess it made sense to them. It just, as far as fuel economy goes, you're not coming out ahead, even though you have a smaller engine. So for the safety tech here in the Trailblazer, it gives you a lot of stuff. Some of the stuff is optional. For example, blind spot monitoring is still an option, and that's bundled with the reverse cross traffic alert. But of course, the backup camera is standard. Automatic emergency braking is standard. But there's a driver confidence group, which gives you, like, for example, you have the lane keep assist. There's adaptive cruise control, which this does have, which is a nice feature to have. Now, I did test that stuff out on the highway a little bit. And first, the lane keep assist. Now, this system is really bad at keeping track of the lanes on the road, because whenever it's not tracking the lanes, it'll be white, and then the indicator will go green whenever it actually is reading the road lines, and will be able to help you with your steering. And I would say that at least half the time this thing is struggling to figure out the road lines. And maybe the roads around me just don't have super clear painting, but all the other vehicles that I've tested with lane keep assist, they don't have as much trouble as this one does. So I don't know if the sensors just aren't as good here in the Trailblazer or what. Anyway, whenever it is working though, it is a fairly passive system, so it's not constantly dinging at you or constantly nudging at the steering wheel. It will nudge a little bit, but it's pretty relaxed, I think, possibly because it's not reading the road lines as strongly as some of the others are, and so it isn't as insistent on helping you out as like some of the other systems are. They're constantly obsessed with steering for you and stuff like that. And the nice thing with this one, there's a nice little handy button. You just press it, it turns it off. There's no warning lights whenever you turn it off or anything, like Subaru insists on giving you a bright orange light in the dashboard when you turn off their lane keep assist. This doesn't have any of that, so that's great. And so for most people that probably enjoy driving themselves, you can just hit that button, forget about that feature. But if you are someone that needs a little bit of help, or you'd like that reassurance, it is nice that they have that. The adaptive cruise control system did work well. Now, it was a little bit jerky with its braking. It wasn't the smoothest adaptive cruise control system, so that might get a little aggravating on long trips or something. But if you're using it in normal conditions, it should be fine. It works. It's just, again, not the smoothest or anything, but not a big deal. And it's nice that you have that in this class of vehicle. And it's great that not only Chevy, but many other competitors do now give you the adaptive cruise. Now, the last thing to mention is the pricing. So, everything about the Trailblazer driving experience is pretty good. Like I said, I like the handling. I think that the power is actually fine most of the time. I love the looks, all that stuff, no problems. But the pricing is a problem to me, I think. And so this one as tested, like I said, is just over $32,000. It's like $32,300, and that puts it towards the top of the pack. The only one that I think can get higher than this is the Jeep Renegade, and those are because they give you some off-roading stuff to actually give you real off-road capability, and that stuff is expensive. And so that's the only one that is, I think, above this. But basically 32 grand or so is about the cap for all of these subcompact crossovers. And like I said, you have stuff like the Kona or even the Mazda CX-30, which gives you more power for the exact same money, or slightly less money in some cases. They give you more features like a heads-up display, which this does not have. There's just a lot of better refinement stuff. Like I said, the CX-30 is so much quieter inside. There's a lot of cheap-feeling plastic still in this vehicle, whereas the Mazda CX-30 has padding everywhere. It's super luxurious. That thing feels like it's as nice as a Lexus inside or something for the same price. And so that's the thing. It kind of goes back to GM. They love doing these higher MSRPs and then offering you 15% off MSRP in some sale, and then you get this great deal knocking it down to a reasonable price. And so I can only comment on MSRP, and at MSRP, this doesn't make sense. There's much better values in other competition out there. But if you do get some type of huge discount on this, then it could make a lot more sense. And so it just, from a reviewing standpoint, I can't bank on what discounts you're going to get when you're shopping for these, so I can't judge it based on a cheaper price. But chances are you will be able to get this cheaper, and depending on how much cheaper you can get it, beneath the pricing of a Mazda CX-30 or a Hyundai Kona, which, by the way, they all offer discounts as well. But if you can get a bigger discount on this, I could see it making sense if they really knock down the price, but at its MSRP price, you know, it's just tough. I mean, there are a couple things like, you know, this is the only one that has wireless Apple CarPlay right now, and that is a super nice feature to have. And I talk about that more in the interior review, but if, you know, like that's a must-have feature is wireless CarPlay, then this is your only option for, you know, the 2021 model year, at least that I know of. And so, you know, there are a couple little things. I do like the fun looks of the outside. I like some of the fun stuff on the interior here. It does have some stuff going for it, but then there's just, you know, like I said, the power's not as much as the others, refinement, all that kind of stuff. This just feels a little bit cheaper inside than some of those. And so that's kind of the thing, is like many other GM products, the pricing is the stumbling point there. But if you can get beyond the pricing and get a good deal on one of these, it can still be a really good choice and a really good option for those that especially like, you know, the looks and stuff like that. But overall, like I said, I like the experience in the Trailblazer here, and I'm hoping that maybe they'll do a sportier version. That'd be kind of fun, especially to help it better compete with some of the other competitors in this segment. But as it sits right now, it's a really nice little crossover, and GM does offer a nicer interior in the Buick Encore GX now, which I'll be reviewing shortly as well. So if you do want something that feels a little more upmarket, that's not going to be much more money, and that will give you that experience. But you know, again, I'll have to wait till I drive that to see if it's anything better than what you get with all the competition. But again, pricing is the thing. If you can get the pricing down on this, then it could be a really solid choice in this segment. But anyway, let me know your thoughts on the Trailblazer here in the comments below. Huge thanks to Chevy for providing me here with a Trailblazer to review for you guys today. But yeah, thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.